All right, I'm going to go over some of the questions here on this Trig review. So this is the Trig review packet. I'm going to go over some of the questions that are not covered in the unit circle video. So here we have sine of x is -7/25, and we want to find secant of x, and we were told we're in quadrant 4. This piece of information is used only to determine if what we're trying to find is positive or negative. In quadrant 4, the x values are positive and the y values are negative, so secant is going to be positive. We're done with that piece of information. Now we need to find secant, and what I'm going to do is use right triangle trig. And there's different things you can do, but this is I default to this. Sine of x is always an angle, equals the opposite over the hypotenuse. If we use the Pythagorean theorem, this side is 24. Now, secant of x, if cosine is opposite or adjacent over hypotenuse, this is going to be hypotenuse over adjacent. We already determined it's going to be positive, so it's going to be 25 over 24. For 6 and 7, what we need to know is different rules for the trig functions. So our goal is to put everything in terms of sine and cosine, because then things start simplifying down. So the other 4 trig functions are cosecant, which we can rewrite as 1 over sine, secant, which we can write as 1 over cosine, tangent, which we can write as sine over cosine, and cotangent, which is going to be cosine over sine. So here I'm going to rewrite this as 1 over cosine over 1 over sine. That's going to be the same as 1 over cosine times sine over 1, which is sine over cosine, which is tangent. For this one, we need to FOIL cosine minus sine times cosine minus sine, and if it helps to write it out that way, go ahead. So this is going to be cosine squared x minus 2 cosine x sine x plus a sine squared x minus 1. Now there is an identity that you learned last year involving sine squared and cosine squared. So we have this. We also have what's called the Pythagorean identity, which says sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta always equals 1. So for this, cosine squared plus sine squared is going to get replaced with 1. Plus 1 minus 1. So those obviously cancel, and we have negative 2 cosine x sine x when we're done. Okay, for this one here, this is going to be 1 over cosine of x minus sine of x over cosine of x times sine of x. This is the same as sine of x over 1, so I can multiply that in. So we're going to have 1 over cosine x minus sine squared x over cosine of x. I have a common denominator, so I can add, or really subtract. So this is cosine, let me jump to this. So 1 minus sine squared. If I take this identity and subtract over either sine or cosine, in this case I want the sine, 1 minus sine squared is equal to cosine squared. So here, this is cosine squared over cosine. And remember that cosine squared is the same as cosine of x squared. We just write it in the middle. So cosine squared divided by cosine is cosine. For this one, we have cosine x over sine x over 1 over sine of x. I can rewrite this as cosine of x over sine of x times sine of x over 1. So this is just cosine of x, and that would be our simplified version. The last problem I'm going to do is if tangent of x equals 1.6492, what is x? For this, we're going to use the calculator. Okay, this is saying tangent of what angle gives me this. So what we have to do this is inverse tangent. So on the calculator, we will second tangent 1.6492, and that is our angle. So we have 58.8 as our answer there. The other questions, especially the questions on this page, that content is covered in the unit circle and radians and degrees video. So hopefully you find this helpful, and I'll see you in class.